Hi,
So,
Kevin.
hey, Victoria, welcome to another show.
Hi, Kevin. Good to talk to you again.
Since we last talked, you moved house. Is that how the Brits say it?
Yes, I moved house.
Yeah.
As you can see from the decor behind me, I've put a lot of effort in so far.
Yeah. I think it's so funny how literal you are. When we just say we moved, right? Saying moved house is kind of the equivalent of pickup sticks. Like we picked up sticks and went.
No,
I
so
just
I
thought it was
didn't
very.
actually pick up my house and relocate it. I have a friend who does that. She's an architect and she has physically relocated houses brick by brick, but I didn't go to that extent. I have moved across the country to a different property.
Well, congratulations, and I might need her WhatsApp after this. But I figured it's been a while since we talked about WWDC. It's been a couple of months since that, and then as of this recording, Wonderlust just happened. So we wanted to talk a little bit about some of those updates, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it takes a while for it to sink in, what the implications are. There's loads of people always talking straight afterwards about what they think is cool. I believe your favourite is usually the emojis and the stickers and things, Kevin.
I, I was excited about more stickers in my sticker pack. I just want to use them more and more with whoever has iChat. And thanks for sending me your iMessage because I can't do that on WhatsApp. Yeah.
But now we've had a little bit of time to think about it, as well as the emojis and the stickers, which obviously make conversations a lot more fun. We've actually had time to think about some of the potential impacts for business users. And I think the thing that we've talked about most, both between the two of us and with our colleagues, really has been the 15-inch MacBook Air, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like it's a big innovation, but what it does is it takes sort of the Macs out of the standard personas. So the use cases of creatives and design folks and developers made sense for MacBook Pro. But those are like, a couple $1,000s. When you get to a MacBook Air, that's 15-inch, that's an M2, that's just as powerful at $1,000, that changes the dynamic of the knowledge worker internally. I think it's applicable to way more personas now.
Yeah, so I guess it's more reasonable to ask people to deploy it at scale, and it's probably going to be easier for people to test as well. At a more reasonable price point if they want to do a pilot for these devices.
Yeah, I think I've got to get Dave Gruver in with us to test some of these. I'm a power user, but I'm not a power tester, right? I'd love to see if it's actually just as powerful as my current MacBook Pro M1. That's what they're saying, so we
Well,
should test it.
the good news for you, Kevin, is that actually I have heard that you and I have MacBook Air on the way to do some testing on. So we're going to have to come up with some ideas of what to do, and we can then report back on them.
I've heard a lot of ideas. I'll see it when I believe it. When it comes to my desk and it's sitting in front of me and I can put my hands on keyboard, then I'll believe it. I'm also excited about my iPhone 15 titanium, I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the idea that you're going to be able to create spatial video, I think, is a really good idea. That's being put in place. That you with your phone can do it rather than having to wear the Vision Pro headset. And
I don't mind wearing that. I just need to get my hands on one.
well, there were a
But I'm
few,
becoming a broken record there with what I want, my wants.
yeah, but there were a few people talking about that and saying, well, hang on a minute, why is that a business function in the iPhone to have that spatial video? But I know you talk to a lot of customers about the use of VR in business, and actually being able to record spatial video is going to be really important.
It's shocking. I mean, I can't tell you what Apple's up to, right? I have been in virtual reality, augmented reality for the last 5 or so years with a different ecosystem partner. And I'll tell you, Apple says that this isn't a VR device. It's a head-mounted display that's a spatial computer. So I think that's much broader appeal than just virtual reality and being in an immersive experience. You're able to move around and leverage different 3D objects on an extended desktop. And so, yeah, if you can capture that with your iPhone and then experience, or others can experience it in Vision Pro, we're getting to some Jetsons type stuff here.
Well, everybody always says that, if you want to know where the technology is going, you've got to keep up to date with your science fiction. So yeah, looking forward to. I mean, I know we've just come off a call about the use of virtual and augmented reality in business. So it is very definitely a business solution rather than just a consumer product. The other thing that I thought was interesting from Wonderlust was the fact that the Apple Watch now has much improved gesture recognition, and I think I mentioned it at the end of episode 1 that this was something I was really interested in. But I talked to you a lot about DEI initiatives, the accessibility of technology, and also the importance of having wearables in asset-intensive industries as part of safety. And I think the idea that actually you can activate a device with gestures, so you're not, and with one-handed gestures, so you're not having to put yourself in an unsafe situation. You're not having to stop and pull out a phone or find a keyboard. You can immediately make contact or find information just by tapping your fingers. And obviously, as a corporate device, there are a lot of sensors on these watches that can tell you where your employee is. Are they where they should be? It tells you whether they're in distress. It tells you whether they've fallen over. There's information there that, well, some people might feel in a corporate environment that's a bit intrusive. People working in dangerous environments might actually be quite pleased that that's being collected. So there is definitely an overlap between the consumer and the business functionality there.
I agree. And the thing that you can hang your hat on is the fact that everything is protected by a secure enclave between you and the Apple product. And so whether you decide to use it for business or use it for consumer, all of your information is protected. Yeah. I'm a big proponent of Apple Watch. I've got one on today. I use it for just as much business as I use it for personal. Yeah. And I'm excited to see that there's new capabilities coming in the new OS.
So we talked to Dave in episode 2 about how to work out whether Mac at scale is right for you, and we've been talking about these various devices and how. I guess one of the things that we're going to need to talk about in more detail is how you decide which devices to use. But I know you've done some work with customers using the Mac evaluation utility.
This is an Apple technology that you can put on your network to see how ready you are to accept Mac in your environment. So it tells you which ports in your network are closed, which security profiles are going to be challenging as it pertains to deploying Mac at scale. And so it's a free offer. I challenge everybody to at least see what your environment looks like from Apple's perspective, and this utility gives you the ability to do that for free.
Well, that's good to know. So we'll put the details of that up on the We Got Your Mac website then. I think that's probably the easiest thing to do so people can find it. And then, as you said, we're going to have to do some testing. So let's keep working on getting our hands on some of this stuff.
And figuring out what we want to test. I want to see how fast it is. I want to see how quickly I can move between, my phone and my laptop and that sort of thing. But what else? What else should we be testing? Durability. Yeah. Do we want to slam it down on the table and determine if it'll break? Spill some water on it.
I think I've told you my story of how I used to test things for robustness before. It used to involve dropping them off the top of the car park.
I'm very careful with my Mac. It's like the Mona Lisa to me. I don't put anything on it, and I carry it around like a little newborn baby.
Okay, well, good to talk to you again, Kevin. And with that, let's move on to today's guest interview. So in the last episode, we talked to Dave Gruver about how to work out whether Mac at scale is actually the right thing for you to do. And he mentioned the importance of understanding TCO of Mac versus your existing devices. So we've asked him back to tell us more about it and about why you need a proper business case. So thanks for coming back, Dave. Welcome back to We Got Your Mac.
Thanks, Victoria. It's good to be back. I'm glad you guys invited me back. You
Oh,
never know.
well, we learnt a lot last time, and so we're keen to understand more. Now, Kevin can't actually join us for this session, so I'm afraid you've just got me, but I'm looking forward to being able to have really in-depth discussion about this, because one of the things that Kevin and I discussed, and I know you and I have talked about this before, is that actually the lack of a really good, solid business case is one of the main reasons that projects don't get off the ground, but it's also often the reason that projects fail. But if the business case hasn't considered everything, then you may actually find that the project itself fails partway through. So we want to have really just talk in more about why it's not enough that the kit that people want is amazing, it's going to make them happier, it's going to make them more productive. What are the other things that we need to consider, and why?
Well, I think you touch on it, right? Companies go to implement, and they haven't thought through all the ramifications. That business case is that opportunity to think ahead on what are the changes that this is going to introduce? What are the opportunities that are going to be created? What are the challenges I'm going to see? And a business case can encapsulate all that and also deliver it in economic terms, right? Because ultimately we're out here to make money, and you got to be able to do that. And if you spend too much, sometimes you can't make enough to offset it. So that becomes an important part of seeing that sort of total picture and wherein comes that total cost of ownership view.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, money is the language that everybody has in common, right? Whether it's spending it or getting it in, it tends to be the common language between the business people, the technologists, and
Yeah.
the board.
Yeah, I mean, we all, whether we're at home or at work, we all live on a budget, right? And so we've got to live within that budget to be successful. So, when you start thinking about your business case, and especially around Macs, is really focusing on some of the differences that introduces. So, first and foremost, the device may cost differently depending on what products you're buying. They may be, in fact, more expensive. In some cases, they may be the same price if you start getting down to those MacBook Air devices, right? So you have to understand that part. You've got to understand, what does the support model look like? Do I have to augment my support staff with special skills, or do I already have that, right? Yeah. What does then you get into some other areas, right? There's areas of sort of, you really need to think about hard costs and soft costs, right? There are things I've actually got to spend money on. There's things that may produce productivity benefits that are a little harder to quantify, but are every bit as valuable if they're, accounted for and expressed correctly. If somebody's more productive on a Mac platform because of the nature of their job, if it's easier for them to get the device configured, any of those things, or if it's harder, it could offset that, and that's going to go to their productivity. How valuable are they, throughout the day?
Okay, so let's break it down. I guess there are three things. I think there are three things we need to. So first of all, we've got to consider the cost, and you mentioned TCO. We all have a tendency to use jargon, but TCO, that's total cost of ownership over the lifetime of the device. So what do you need to take into account when you're calculating that, particularly if you're at this point of comparing different device types?
Yeah, so you've got to think about what's your upfront purchase cost. That's a key one. How long will you keep that device?
Yeah.
I may be keeping certain, Windows devices I may keep for 3 years. Mac devices have really good long life cycles, maybe 4 or 5 years. So I've got to break down that upfront cost into an annual cost, right? That's the first, and that's the easiest step along the way. Then you've got to think about, do I need additional software to support this device, or perhaps do I need less software? Maybe I'm paying for licenses for some Windows devices that aren't appropriate or necessary on the Mac, and I can remove that cost. Or maybe I need to purchase additional licensing for, say, a management software, such as something like Jamf. That's an additional cost. So you need to think about those licensing costs. You also need to ensure that the products you already have are licensed. Some licenses can restrict how that product is used across different platforms. So that's one of those gotchas, right? If you don't think about that ahead of time, you go to roll it out, and it's like, let's go. It's like, wait a minute, we can't run this critical piece of software on this platform, right? So you need to think about license costs are a very good next step to look at.
Yeah.
Then you need to think about support costs, right?
Yeah.
Those are probably the big ones. And then, those are sort of your more hard dollar, green dollar items to really consider. And then you start after that, you get into the kind of the more challenging area of the soft costs, things like productivity, things like energy usage. There's a number of other things that are a little harder to quantify. And frankly, you really don't want to rely on those to make your business case because it'll be a lot harder. If you can make your business case with the green dollars, you're usually on your
Okay.
way.
So you look at the costs, and the software piece is very close to my heart. Having spent years in software asset management, yeah, licenses aren't necessarily just a free for all and transferable. But so you've got your hardware, you've got your software, you've got any additional products that you might need to invest in to support this. You've potentially got maybe some training and some education to deal with that productivity piece. So you've got those costs there. What happens? So you then get onto the benefits, and you've got to get that balance between costs and benefits. But one of the things that comes up there is, and it may come up with the costs, is what happens if your IT budget isn't centralized? So you do your business case, you've then got to go to each business unit potentially and say, for every, we've got to find a way of working out how much is paid for by whom. And likewise, when you work out the benefits, which we'll talk about in a minute, you've then got to work out how you get people to sign up to be accountable for those benefits as well.
Yeah, and that's budgets where the money lies is a challenging part. I like to start with really try to be very sort of a holistic view. What is net best for the company?
Yeah.
Is this decision, as I go through these numbers, is this going to be a net benefit for the company for whatever reasons? And if the answer to that is yes, now I've got to work out how to pay for it within my budget structure. And based on your budget structure, you may think about positioning and emphasizing different parts of your business case in different ways. And, it's a little bit of tap dancing. That's what we do. But you've still got to be genuine to the core numbers, right?
Yeah.
But you can emphasize certain parts. A key thing for sure is, if you come in and say, hey, we've decided that this particular platform is advantageous to the business for these, 6, 7 reasons. But by the way, you're going to pay more up front. And that's in, the business unit budget. They buy the devices, centralized IT does its work. You have to know you're going to get some pushback. So in doing so, you need to be able to express to that business unit what the net advantages are. And ideally, some of those advantages accrue to that business unit in other ways in terms of whether it's productivity, could be employee retention, could be employee engagement. Those are things that the business unit is absolutely paying for. If their employees aren't engaged, if they're having high turnover, that's costing that business unit. If you can deliver a platform that engages and retains employees better, you can help them understand that this may be a little more upfront investment creates a better long-term return. So you just have to think about it and, wear the shoes of the other people in your business case, right? Think about if I'm over on this side looking at it, how would I view it? What are the important things to me? Yet if I'm over here in, an asset management group, it looks different. If I'm in a sales group, it looks different. So taking the time to understand and talking to those groups to understand what's important to them, that becomes part of your business case and part of how you articulate the benefits.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this before, but quite often finance are the toughest people to get this through. So if you're getting pushback from finance, I guess we're putting numbers on this, but how do you go about really getting finance engaged?
You got to talk to them, and I think one of the ways I think to go into it too is don't necessarily go into as you're building the business case and you're engaging finance, you're engaging asset management, you're engaging business units, kind of go into it with, hey, we have an idea. This is the concept that we're trying to achieve. We want to work with you to understand if we can find the numbers and engage them in the process. Because a lot of times, if you go to a finance department with your conclusion, they're going to want to poke holes in your conclusion because they weren't part of it, sort of that not in my backyard kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think engaging them early is a real advantageous part of it. Because then you're going to understand from that accounting team, that finance team, what's important to them. How do they look at money? They're, looking at it in terms of just, today's dollars, net presence value, any of those various accounting things that come into play that can have some influence. So having them involved early, I think, is a smart strategic play as you're building the case. I mean, an interesting story too is, and this goes to where you start talking about hard dollar and soft dollar costs. I kind of always feel like the soft dollar costs have to be really good to, offset any hard dollar costs. And we had a situation where I was working years ago where, there was an economic downturn. We put some restrictions in spending. And basically, and this is, 20 years ago, people weren't allowed to get a laptop unless they had the approval of a direct report of the CEO, which pretty much clamped us. A lot of people had desktops. And that was in place for several years. And as time went on, laptops became more competitive with desktops. And one day we were looking at it, and we did a real simple pencil line thing that realized that if one of our employees with a laptop got 2 more hours of productivity per year over the 3-year period, so 6 hours of productivity, that would offset the benefit or offset the cost of that laptop versus the desktop plus display, right? So it was a ridiculously small number. And when we took that to our CIO at the time, we said, here's the math, right? And if you don't believe that somebody with a mobile device is going to give you 2 more years per year, then let's keep this policy in place. Well, pretty obviously that CIO is a smart guy, and he was like, yeah, that policy's done, and that tomorrow. And so I think part of that really goes to, when you're talking about the soft dollar costs, don't overpromise.
Yeah.
Right? Create soft dollar costs that tell a strong story that any reasonable person is going, yeah, I believe that will happen. I believe we will get that much more productivity, that much more engagement, whatever these factors are. We see it all the time. I mean, I think, Victoria, you worked for consultancy companies, and they would come out and say, there's 250% TCO, right?
Yeah.
And anybody in IT looks at it and goes, no, there's not. But you know what? Maybe even 110% TCO would have sold the business case. Don't overpromise. Right?
Well, absolutely. And I quite often used to say to people, you could knock a couple of noughts off the end and divide it by 2. And this is where actually, as you said, early engagement with finance helps. Working out what is the template. You probably have a business case template that your organization wants you to use. And also, what do they want? And often paying for itself within 12 months is all you need to get a project signed off. They don't, quite often the targets for getting a business case approved aren't as aggressive as people think. And it's much more achievable than people think if they do proper discovery and proper assessment of their costs and benefits.
And I think, you point out that timing becomes a big part of it too, right? And a lot of, IT shops are always under pressure to deliver, right? IT shops often get seen as, they're just cost drags on the whole organization, right? And when you go in and say, hey, I'm going to have an ROI within 12 months, it's a much easier conversation to have that at the beginning of the fiscal year. You go in at the last quarter, they don't want to give you money at the last quarter and not get all that money back because they're looking for that year-end number. So you want to be sensitive to what's going on around you timing-wise and what the economic climate is. Sometimes, even if the ROI is really good, you just don't have the money to make the investment. It's sort of like any one of us, right? Your car breaks down. I'd really like to buy a new car because I'm going to spend so much repairing this one, but I just don't have the money. So I'm going to just repair what I have, and maybe next year I'll get the new car, right? And so you get into some of that too. There's a timing thing you have to be sensitive to. You've got to be realistic about the environment that you're playing in when you go to present this business case. Again, the earlier in the budget cycle you can do it, the better. And oftentimes, if you've really got your act together, you're going to put this together. If say you're just on a regular calendar / fiscal year, right now, right, we're in the late third, early fourth quarter time frame now. This is the time to make sure you have solid business cases about the next year.
Yeah.
Because that way you can get the upfront budget allocations you need to achieve the results that you promised to deliver by the end of the year. Trying to go at it now and say, yeah, we want to start this year, give us the money. You're creating a steep hill for yourself that maybe isn't necessary. A little bit of patience and some delivery can really help you.
And it's also worth remembering, actually, even when the business case is signed off, there's still quite a lot of upfront work to do. So, you've got to work that into there as well, because it's not like you give me the money and the stuff's going to be deployed and in production straight away.
Well, I think you just touched on a really important thing that people miss in their business cases is timing. So, and your point, the business case is the starting line. When you get that approved, that's the starting line. That's not the finish line. And in your business case, you've got to figure out, okay, when I decide I'm going to do this, how long will it take me to get these devices in? Am I cold starting? Is it going to take, maybe it's going to take me 6 months because I've got to negotiate a new contract or something, or I've got the pipeline ready and I can hit the ground running. You need to think about those timings as well. Or if I've got to ramp up help desk support, that doesn't happen overnight. If I've got to put in specific support infrastructure, that doesn't happen overnight. So that becomes another really key point that sometimes people don't give enough consideration to, right? That you need to think about within your business case. Part of that is the project plan. You need to be realistic about the timings of when you're going to draw money and when you're going to return benefit.
Yeah, and on the benefits point, I think one of the other things that I know we've discussed before is that people tend to forget that they're actually probably going to be asked to report on these benefits. So they need to actually be working out how they are going to measure them. And some of them, the productivity benefits, the employee satisfaction benefits, some of those can be quite hard to measure. So you need to get some agreement up front on what metrics you're going to use and what those numbers are going to look like in order to say it's been successful.
Absolutely. And I think, it goes to the whole concept of baselining, right? Yeah. And that, frankly, can be part of your business case. We've baselined this level of employee satisfaction, and we've looked at it against industry standards, and we're down here, and the industry is up here. We believe through this project we can raise this up, right? So now we've got a baseline to start from. Here's our baseline cost. Here's our baseline, maybe it's something as simple as with the Mac platform with something like Apple Business Manager and enrollment, we can get users up and running much quicker on new devices. Okay, well, how long does it take now? Make sure you baseline and understand that. Then you can describe, we're going to go from here to here. That difference represents hours of productivity for that user and reduce frustration and reduce calls to the help desk, things like that now those feed into your business case as part of that TCO.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot here, and I'm sure it will be very helpful for people. What would be your top 3 tips for building a business case out of everything we've discussed?
I would say, make sure you've got the green dollars, the hard dollars to support your basic premise within reason, right? And understand where that sits. When it comes to soft dollars, don't overpromise. You should be able to make a compelling statement without overpromising. And then if you exceed that, scream to the high hills about how good you did. And then I think the other one is really think through your timing. Make sure you've thought through the timing of implementation, when you'll spend, when you'll get return. And if I can add a fourth one, just know your audience. Know who you're talking to at various aspects of this business case development.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's very important, making sure you're having the right conversation with the right people. Well, thank you very much, Dave. That's been extremely informative. So with what we discussed last time on how to work out whether this is the right thing for you to do, and what we've discussed now about how to put the business case together, hopefully our listeners will feel they're in a strong position to tell their audience within their organisation what they need to do, how much it's going to cost, and what the benefits are going to be. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure we will get you back again at some point in the future.
Look forward to any chance to come back and work with you, Victoria. Thank you.
Thanks very much.